Good evening from Telesur Studios in Caracas, Venezuela. My name is Reagan Devines. We begin with this evening's headlines. In spite of improved relations, the U.S. votes against the lifting of Cuba's blockade at the UN General Assembly. Colombia's president in emergency talks after ELN guerrillas killed 12 soldiers and kidnapped 2 others. And Doctors Without Borders says Saudi Arabia did bomb one of its hospitals in Yemen. The Saudis deny it. The details on these stories and more now on From the South. With 191 votes in favor and only the United States and Israel against, the UN General Assembly once more voted in favor of removing the U.S. blockade against Cuba. The vote comes as the United States and Cuba are finally normalizing relations, but the U.S. still voted no. Telesur's Bianca Perez has the details.
The Assembly is now voting on
191 of the 193 members of the United Nations voted in favor of the United States lifting the economic blockade that for over 50 years has been instilled on the island of Cuba. Only the U.S. and Israel voted against this measure.
The facts clearly show that the economic, commercial, and financial blockade imposed against Cuba is in full effect. 10 months after the announcements made on December 17th, there have been no tangible modifications or substantial in the practice of the blockade.
For 23 consecutive years, the member nations have voted about the resolution presented by Cuba. However, though the number of countries in favor has increased yearly, the vote seems to fall on deaf ears.
It will remain symbolic, and it has a reputational cost to the United States. It's very unlikely to have any impact on the Congress, because the Congress is generally divided among people who already know what they think, and they're really worried.
For this analyst, the reason that the U.S. voted against the resolution was that there wasn't a recognition of what they see as a major effort.
The Obama administration was disappointed that the Cubans weren't willing to work with them to come up with a resolution that might say much of the same thing, condemning the embargo, but that would recognize and celebrate what has already been achieved.
The international community showed their support for the island nation during the plenary session.
Our support and unconditional solidarity once again with Cuba, with its people and its government for their heroic gesture. The Cuban Revolution, which taught us the first steps towards dignity and the restitution of our rights to the peoples of Latin America and the Caribbean.
According with the Cuban government, the economic blockade has cost the island of Cuba more than $800 million thus far. Bianca Perez, Telesur, Washington, D.C.
The U.S. representative to the UN said it was unfortunate that Cuba had presented a motion that was almost identical to the one the year before.
Although normalization will be a long and complex road, we've made considerable progress. We regret, therefore, that the government of Cuba has chosen to proceed with its annual resolution. The text falls short of reflecting the significant steps that have been taken and the spirit of engagement President Obama has championed. As a result, the United States cannot support it. If Cuba thinks this exercise will help move things forward in the direction both governments have indicated they wish, it is mistaken.
However, the Russian, Chinese, and CELAC representatives were just a few of those who insisted on the need for the U.S. to immediately lift the economic, commercial, and financial blockade on Cuba.
We believe that the immediate lifting of this block is a necessity. We consider that the practice of unilateral economic sanctions against Cuba have a purely political objective and are not justified in this present time. They are a residue of the past and cause damage to the socio-economic development of Cuba and the development of regional economic cooperation.
We hope the United States and Cuba pursue dialogue and consolidate the momentum to fully expand their relations. We see the United States has begun to partially lift the blockade on telecommunications and tourism in Cuba. We hope this will culminate in the total elimination of the blockade. We hope the United States fully removes the policy of sanctions and the blockade against Cuba and normalize relations so that both parties develop under the Charter of the United Nations and the principles of international relations.
SELAC strongly supports adoption of the necessary resolution of ending the economic, commercial, and financial blockade imposed by the United States against Cuba. We highlight the effort of the Sister Republic of Cuba to achieve language appropriate to the circumstances and stress the inconsistency in implementing unilateral measures which are not backed by international law.
Cuban leaders say the blockade has had a severe impact on the island's health system. The restrictions often even prevent chemotherapy from being purchased directly, so it has to be brought through third-party countries, increasing the prices and delaying treatment reaching the hospitals. About 300 children are treated each year at 6 cancer facilities around Cuba. Official figures show survival rates could be almost 70% with the needed drug, but they are 20% without them.
For us, it's essential, for her and for other patients with similar histology, to use a drug that increases the survival rate for these patients, as is in the case of temozolomide.
Moving to Colombia, after an attack on Monday that left 12 soldiers dead and 6 disappeared, Defense Minister Luis Carlos Villegas announced that the National Liberation Army, the ELN, had kidnapped 2 of the soldiers. President Juan Manuel Santos called an extraordinary meeting of his National Security Council to discuss the situation. The attack targeted a convoy transporting ballot boxes from last Sunday's elections in a remote indigenous reserve in the Arauca region. The ELN has been in exploratory talks with the government for almost 3 years now, but has not opened a formal peace process.
2 Colombian soldiers were kidnapped by the National Liberation Army, and therefore the ELN is responsible for the soldiers' life and integrity, as well as the return to the military forces and to their families.
Members of Bolivia's LGBT community are more discriminated against in their old age than any other group. The government has released a video featuring the experiences of elderly gay and transsexual people to help raise awareness. Some members of the community are forced into prostitution after being abandoned by their families. Dimitri O'Donnell reports from La Paz.
Bravely speaking out on behalf of elderly lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender people in Bolivia. This is Titina, a transvestite theatre actor who's experienced discrimination all of her life. She decided to go public with her story as part of a government campaign to change attitudes.
But the worst thing is that I do not have health insurance. We have no security as older people. Some of us have arthritis.
Laura has made the transition to become female, but she was shunned by her family and society after she went public. Left with few options, Laura turned to prostitution.
Sex work here in Bolivia is not recognized as such. There are no social benefits, no pension, no social services. It has a lot of risks too.
65-year-old Consuelo also feels abandoned because of her sexuality.
There is a lot of discrimination. First, because I'm a lesbian. Second, for being a woman. Third, for being elderly. So it's triple discrimination in my case.
What we are asking for is solidarity, with more clinics and geriatric services where we can go to with confidence and not feel badly treated by the government or the health staff.
The government admits the rights of older LGBT citizens are often not respected. In time, it hopes the public will understand their situation better. But time is not something many members of this marginalised group have a lot of. Dimitri O'Donnell, Telesur, La Paz.
Today marks the 5th anniversary of the death of former Argentine President Néstor Kirchner. Now, Kirchner was elected president back in 2003 when Argentina was in its lowest point, and he guided the nation out of trouble and implemented hugely popular progressive social policies. He was also responsible for prosecuting members of the last military dictatorship and has been a symbol of human rights in Argentina. He died of a heart attack at the age of 60, devastating the country. And coming up after the break, Slovenia has become the new entry point for refugees as thousands cross from Croatia in Europe's largest movement of people since the Second World War. This story and more next.
Discover Latin America and the world in our programs. Telesur Reports, The Real USA, the stories behind the tweets. Ataman, Lives, Know Your Body, Open Files. Exposing the conflicts that affect our people. Compelling personal stories and the most controversial events. See it all on telesurtv.net in English. Telesur. Wherever the news, you'll be there.
Day by day, they're in the street with one mission: change the world through their actions. This is a different type of program, a conversation. The perspective you won't find in traditional media can be found on The Laura Flanders Show. Watch it on telesurtv.net/English. Telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there.
We need to understand the world we live in. We require news with critical points of view, thorough analysis, and social commitment. This information is vital to think, to understand, and to change. The world demands a new perspective. telesurtv.net/English. Wherever the news, you'll be there.
Welcome back. International aid group Doctors Without Borders say that their hospital in northern Yemen has been bombed by an airstrike, making it the 20th hospital that has been partially destroyed in similar strikes there in the last 6 months. President of the group, Misakdish Terzian, said that there were several Saudi-led airstrikes in the area at the time and that the hospital campment was 99% destroyed. He added that only 2 staff members were slightly wounded. 21 Shiite Houthi rebels and 15 fighters loyal to President Abdurabu Mansur Hadi were killed in the city of Taiz when loyalist forces attempted to take back Yemen's presidential palace. The palace was destroyed in the process. Aid group Doctors Without Borders said that it is frustrating that after weeks of negotiations, they have made no progress in convincing officials of the need to provide impartial medical assistance to the victims of the ongoing fighting. Pakistan's Information Minister Pervez Rashid says that any damage caused by Monday's 7.5 earthquake will be rectified between 2 to 4 days. He said that although the damage assessment by Pakistan's army is ongoing, many victims have been reached and are taken care of. The challenge of the government is the terrain close to the epicenter of the earthquake. However, Rashid said that tents are being provided for those who have lost their homes, which will all be rebuilt. Refugees continue to arrive in European countries. The decision by Hungary to close the border 9 days ago means that Slovenia is now the principal access point for refugees. In recent days, 66,000 people have entered Slovenia, fleeing conflicts in their countries of origin. The European Union will put in controls on the Croatian border to register refugees that arrive from the Greek, Macedonian and Albanian borders. The European Union has offered Greece assistance in the form of temporary subsidized tents, which can accommodate 20,000 refugees. This was announced by Greek Migration Minister Ioannis Mouzalas. This is part of the EU's new 17-point action plan to address the flow of refugees through Greece and the Balkans. French opposition MP Jean-Frédéric Poisson says that the choice of Syrian leadership lies in the hands of the Syrian people and not with foreign countries. Poisson is visiting Syria along with 2 other French lawmakers with plans of meeting President Bashar al-Assad on Wednesday. He said that resolving the Syrian crisis cannot happen without a discussion with President Assad, something the U.S. government refuses to do. He added that he believes the gains claimed by the coalition forces made up of Russian, Iran and Syria's own ground forces.
Finding a political solution of the situation in Syria necessarily goes through a dialogue with the Syrian president in place, who was elected by the Syrian people.
Since September 30th, Russia says they have conducted hundreds of airstrikes against militant targets, including Islamic State. They also have been providing air support to Assad's ground forces, which have also reported large gains. There have been criticisms that Russia's strikes have hit civilian targets and mosques. Russia's Deputy Finance Minister Anatoly Antonov responded to those claims.
In connection to the aforementioned, we have invited today military attachés from the United States, Great Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and NATO, and asked them to present us with official evidence of the statements made or officially deny them. It especially concerns some egregious accusations in some English-language media of pseudo strikes on hospitals.
Reports are that 3 people were injured after Israeli police shot rubber-coated bullets and stun grenades in a crowd of Palestinian youths at the northern entrance of the city of Al-Biraya, right next to Beit El Israeli settlement in the Palestinian territories. Now, Israeli police also deployed CS gas into the crowd. Palestine's health ministry said that to date, 61 Palestinians have been killed in the last weeks of violence, with over 2,120 injured from live rounds, rubber-coated steel bullets, and physical assault. Our correspondent Noor Harazin is in Gaza and has more on the situation there.
Now it has been over 3 weeks of violence between Palestinians and Israeli occupation forces. Last night, Palestinian media reported that a rocket was fired from the Gaza Strip towards southern Israel. The news from the Israeli side said that there was no casualties. However, the Israeli warplanes answered back by attacking targets here in the Gaza Strip. They attacked a road that leads to the airport of Gaza, Yasser Arafat Airport, and at the same time they targeted a Hamas resistance site. Meanwhile, in the West Bank, the escalation continued between Palestinian youth and Israeli forces. Every now and then, every few hours, we get the news of a new attack, stabbing attack, and also Israeli attack on Palestinian youth. For now, and as the winter is beginning, the Palestinian people are hoping that this third intifada will lead either to a real freedom or will lead to a specific deal where the Israeli side will agree on giving the Palestinian people some of their rights, or it will end peacefully.
Catalan separatists put forward their so-called roadmap for independence. The declaration made in the regional parliament for Catalonia to split from Spain is expected to be approved by November 9th. And according to the secessionist plan, it will be followed by a constituent process that will lead to full independence within 18 months. But Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy has vowed to block any move.
In Madrid, they keep having a very serious problem. They do not understand what is happening in Catalonia. So the threatening position of Rajoy is the only thing, honestly, that will make the phenomenon grow, grow and grow. And with each time, it becomes more complicated because the positions are becoming more tense. They are polarizing towards the extremes. Honestly, I think Madrid has to reflect deeply and know what is really happening because they don't know how to interpret it.
The first global summit of the BRICS, the association of the 5 major economies, Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, is going on in Russia until Wednesday. The BRICS countries are advocating for collective global action to solve the world's issues, as well as the benefits of a multipolar world. Topics that will be discussed at the summit include international finance, reform of multilateral financial institutions, issues of international trade, and the prospects of preferential trade among the BRICS countries.
BRICS members have strong adherence to the root principles and norms of public law. We advocate a strengthening of the central coordinating role of the UN in world affairs and oppose the solution of problems through either the use of force, interfering into domestic affairs of a country, or the pressure of one country on another, including the imposition of one-sided sanctions.
And now a brief of other stories making news around the world.
Pablo Iglesias has just resigned from his post as a member of the European Parliament. Iglesias, who is also the secretary of the Spanish anti-establishment party Podemos, said that he is leaving the parliament to, quote, avoid the deputies in the parliament. He referenced the refugee crisis, which he says do not receive the empathy, respect and assistance they require from the parliament. After there was no clear winner in Egypt's parliamentary elections last week, voters returned for a first-round runoff this Tuesday. It is expected the results will strengthen President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's control. Voting will continue next month, with final results announced in early December. Egypt has been without a parliament since 2012. Rajendra Nikalji, popularly known as Choto Rajan or Little Rajan, has been arrested by Indonesian police. Nikalji is an Indian gangster thought to be connected with over 24 murder cases. He was apprehended at the Nuar Rari International Airport. And retired pediatric neurosurgeon Ben Carson has increased his voter support figures in the United States, now beating Donald Trump. That's according to recent polls. In response to the poll figures, Trump said that he does not believe the results.
Excitement has been brewing in Japan ever since the unpredicted success in the country's recent game against South Africa in the Rugby World Cup. They beat South Africa 34-32. Now, new young fans of the game are lining up to learn the sport. 52 Japanese children turned up for an introductory event at Tokyo's Katsushika Rugby School, about 5 times the intake of the year before. Japan will also host the Rugby World Cup in the year 2019. After 3 hours of questioning, Indian cricketer Amit Mishra was released on bail. This after he was arrested for allegedly assaulting a woman in Bangaluru's Commissioner of Police, Sandeep Patel. The arrest will not prevent Mishra from playing for India, but said that it was up to the Indian Cricket Board to decide if they want to include him in the team. And to close this evening, over 10,000 people dressed in traditional clothing and participated in a folk dance in India on Monday, all in an attempt to enter the Guinness Book of World Records for the world's largest folk dance. It's called the Kulu Nati and it lasted for 1 hour, making it the first one to enter the Guinness Book in the category of folk dance. From our news teams in Quito, Ecuador, and right here in Caracas, Venezuela, my name is Regan Devines. Have a great evening. We'll see you tomorrow.